Hello, everyone. Good morning to those of you in Singapore or elsewhere in Asia. And good evening if you're in North America, like our speaker who is joining us from LA today. My name is Carmen Pang, and I am with the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee of the Jane Goodall Institute, Singapore. And I want to welcome you to the third JGIS ConservAction Lecture of 2021. And today we're going to continue our journey to the Americas. But before we get to the presentation, I like to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, in order to minimize distraction and conserve bandwidth, may we ask you to mute your microphones and turn off your cameras during the presentation. And secondly, please note that this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you'll also find recordings of our past lectures and many other videos, including the very popular storytelling sessions. And I think Tanya is going to help us type in the address to the YouTube, to our YouTube channel in the chat box now. So please do check it out. And lastly, please also use the chat box to ask questions you have for our speaker, and we'll get to them in the Q&A segment after the presentation. Okay, now that we have gotten through the housekeeping items, I'd like to bring in Dr. Andy Ang, President of JGIS. And Andy will be telling us a little bit more about the Jane Goodall Institute in Singapore and what we do and how you can help us. Andy, are you there?
Yes. Hi. Thanks so much, Carmen. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us in this JGIS lecture series on a Saturday morning. So for the Jane Goodall Institute, I think a lot of you know what we do, but mainly for those who join us for the first time, this is a short introduction about Jane Goodall Institute in Singapore. So for JGIS, our vision is for people to live in harmony with nature. And the mission is to inspire, educate, and activate each individual to make a better world for animals, people, and the environment. And in JGIS, we have three main strategic pillars. Under the roots and shoots, the focus is very much on youth education and capacity building in students and also in teachers. So you can see we have programs such as Leaders Council, Plant for Hope campaign, and also online workshops. Under the wildlife and environment pillar, it's very much focused on ground activation. So we have Monkey Walks, Monkey Guards program, which promotes the coexistence between people and long-tailed macaques in Singapore. We also have Citizen Science program, where volunteers are being trained to go out there to nature reserves and also in urban areas to collect data on our primates so that we can use this information to work with authorities like the National Parks Board in order to manage the species and to conserve them. So for the Public Outreach and Engagement Committee, its focus is on sharing knowledge and education outreach. So for today's lecture, it's under the lecture series, where we bring speakers like Susan to share more about the work that they do in primate conservation, not just in this part of the world, but actually, we bring in speakers from around the world. The lecture series started in 2017 when Dr. Jane was in Singapore to share her perspectives on how we can live in harmony with nature. And from then on, we invited speakers from Asia. So we have friends from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Thailand, where at that time they could actually come into Singapore physically to share their conservation work in their home country. We also have a speaker from Laos, and at the session, we also shared about the primate conservation work in Singapore. And in 2019, Dr. Jane came to Singapore again to share more about what we can do in order to coexist with wildlife and also work with the local community to do that. And then we brought in speakers from Africa to share more about chimpanzee conservation work and also rehabilitation of these charismatic primates. And we have Dr. Collins, who shared more about his work on baboons in Gombe National Park. And this year, we actually had speakers from Central South America. So we started off with spider monkeys in South America, and then woolly monkeys also in South America. And today we have Dr. Susan Perry to share more about the really intelligent white-faced capuchin monkeys of Costa Rica. And so for lecture series like this and a lot of our programs, they are volunteer run, which means that we require donations and fundings to get these programs going. So any amount of funding, it's very much appreciated. If you can donate through these links, that'll be great. So that's all I have. Carmen, back to you.
Thank you, Andy. And yeah, so, Andy mentioned about all those previous lectures, and for the ones that were done on Zoom, they are all available on our YouTube channel. So please do go there and revisit our travels to Africa, and then this year to the Americas. Okay, now on to the main event. I'm going to bring in my JGIS co-host, Dr. Vilma Di Rosario, to introduce our speaker. Vilma, over to you.
Thanks, Carmen. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, and it's really very nice that Susan could join us today. Thank you so much, Susan, on behalf of JGIS. Susan is a professor of anthropology at the University of California in Los Angeles. She's also the president of the Wild Capuchin Foundation. Susan, like Dr. Jane Goodall, is involved and actually founded a long-term study of the capuchins. Dr. Jane, of course, studied the chimpanzees. Susan studied and studies the capuchin monkeys of Costa Rica. She started the project in 1990 with Joseph Manson and Julie Gross Lewis, and started with the aim of learning how the monkeys, their social intelligence, and she and her team and many of her students were able to follow individuals, several of them, over the course of their lifetime. And this, I think, is very interesting, especially for us in JGIS and in Singapore, because we are only beginning to study the life histories of our primates right now, the Raffles-banded langur and the long-tailed macaque. And we haven't even started with the Sunda slow loris. On behalf of JGIS, I would like to welcome Dr. Susan Perry to talk about conserving capuchins, 3 decades of research on wild white-faced capuchin monkeys in the Lomas Babudel, Costa Rica. Susan, please.
Thank you, Vilma and Carmen, for inviting me to talk tonight. I'm really enjoying hearing about all the amazing work you're doing, and I'm also a big fan of macaques, which I studied before I switched to capuchins. So I'm really pleased to hear that you're generating so much enthusiasm for those marvelous animals. I know that all of us have been inspired by Jane Goodall's work, both her work as a researcher, as a conservationist, and I'm happy to tell you about those aspects of my work which are along the same lines as hers. So Jane, as you all know, was a real pioneer in the field. She was the first to do a lot of things in primatology. And so subsequent primatologists have learned a lot from her, both from what she did really well and from mistakes she made, which she has now prevented us from making. For example, the feeding of the chimps. Her individual-centered approach, in which she so boldly described personalities and individual social strategies at a time when that wasn't originally considered to be scientific, was really groundbreaking. And it's also been a really potent conservation tool. So when people can relate personally to stories about individuals from other species, then they're a lot more motivated to conserve their habitats. So in the spirit of Jane, I'm going to tell you the life stories of a few of the many capuchin monkeys who have particularly inspired me over the years to ask interesting scientific questions. Wait, can you see my slides?
Not yet, Susan.
Okay, sorry.
Not yet.
Screen share.
Now we
Yes.
can.
Now
Yes.
you can. Okay, good. So first slide. Okay, there we go. Second slide. So I want to tell you the life stories of some of the monkeys that have been really inspiring to me and my field crew as we develop this research program. I imagine some of you have read the book Manipulative Monkeys, and so I'm not going to talk about the monkeys in Abby's group so much in this talk, just to give you some new stories. So today I'll talk about Moth and Pablo and Mescala, who are real leaders in Rambo's group, and about a couple of orphans, Nobu and Winslow, and also about some creative introverts, Rumor and Napoleon. And so I'll begin by giving you a few words about the field site. I work in the Lomas Barbudal Biological Reserve and also the surrounding private land. So monkeys don't know which is a reserve and what's private, right? So they go anywhere. And I've also been doing a lot of work on Hacienda Pelón de la Bajura in Costa Rica. So this is tropical dry forest. It's one of the most highly endangered ecosystems in the world and also one of the most diverse biologically. Now, most of the flat land has been deforested to make room for farms and ranch land. So what's left is very steep forest. And so we spend all day fording rivers and climbing up and down cliffs. And so that's a pain. But then the good thing is that this is deciduous forest. So the leaves fall off of the trees for half of the year. And the canopy is really pretty short for a tropical forest, which means that we have great visibility compared to many forest sites. So let me tell you a little bit about the natural history. Capuchins generally live in permanent groups composed of 5 to 41 individuals. And so there will be multiple males and multiple females in each group. This species can live up to 55 years in captivity, but we think that in the wild, they tend to live only to their late 30s. So the maximum lifespan we've documented is 37 for females and about 35 for males. Females have their first offspring around age 6, minimum being 5.5 years, and males around 7.7 years. Though males mature skeletally around 10 and don't typically breed until they're between 10 and 20 years of age. The most offspring we've ever seen a female produce is 13 and 27 for males. Here are some key features of capuchin natural history that make it a really special species. In addition to these slow life histories I've just described, they have extraordinarily large brains, so the highest brain to body ratio of any non-human primate. They form coalitions a lot, and they have a rich repertoire of gestures and postures for displaying who's siding with whom. As you can see in this little slide here, you've got these two quite obviously allied against the third one. They also do a lot of alloparenting, that is babysitting, and it's of a pretty extreme nature. So it's not obligatory like it is in the marmosets and tamarins, but they do nurse one another's offspring. And orphans can survive with a lot of this alloparenting. They have a complex kinship structure with a very high degree of relatedness for a primate, which I'll talk more about later. Males are typically dominant to females, and females have a linear hierarchy, which is stable. The alpha male role is quite clearly defined and very important, and then the rankings between the subordinate males are less well defined. This diagram shows you the group sizes over the years and the fissions in these groups. So I started out in 1990 with just one group, Abby's group, and then I habituated various other groups over the course of the study. But in the meantime, when the groups would reach around 30-some individuals, they tend to fission. So you can see Abby's group has fissioned multiple times over the years, same with Rambo's group. And when they do fission, it tends to be along matrilineals. So females will stick with their close female kin, and then males generally prefer to go with dad, or at least to go with the group that does not have their closest maternal kin, presumably for the purpose of inbreeding avoidance. We did have one case in which there was a group fusion. So this was a group that got really tiny. It only had one adult female left, and she accompanied her male relatives when they moved to a new group and joined that. This is another way of viewing the population structure. So here, each circle is a group that I study, and the red lines denote the fissions, so you can see which ones are matrilineally related. And then these purple arrows show male dispersal events. So You could see also, not only are they going from group to group within my study population, but they're coming in from the outside. And capuchins can cross even pastures and roads to get to other forest fragments. Over here, you see the a snapshot of the home ranges for these different groups at one point in time. I think it was 2005. And you can see that they overlap ranges quite extensively with other groups, and they're regularly running into other groups. Another thing I want to point out in this diagram is that the green and the blue denote patrolines, where we had long-term alphas of about 18 years. In this one, we had alpha male fawns whose sons went on to these other green groups and monopolized reproduction over there. Same here, Pablo, who we'll talk about, monopolized reproduction in Rambla's group, and his sons went on to monopolize reproduction in the blue groups. And I should say also that when they disperse, males tend to disperse with their male kin. They don't go alone, they go with their male kin. So both sexes are maintaining kin ties over the lifespan. Vilma and Carmen wanted me to talk a little bit about the kinds of data that we collect and how we collect it for those of you who are contemplating being a volunteer or having a career in primatology. So these are the kinds of data that we collect at my site. The behavioral data is the main focus. So we've collected over 113,000 hours of behavioral data over the past 31 years. And this includes focal follows, group scans, ad libitum data, special protocols for food processing, and documenting fights. We collect a lot of poop too, and we use that to figure out who the parents are. So we extract DNA from it, and that is sufficient with 18 microsatellite loci to say who the mother and the father are. We also use fecal samples for hormonal analyses sometimes. And we collect demographic data. Of course, whenever we encounter a group, we say who's in it and what kind of health status they have. So we do that for 13 groups, and over the years, more than 750 monkeys. We also do a lot of audio recording of vocalizations, video recording, so we can document behavioral repertoires, both for individuals and groups. And we do personality assessments. When volunteers are at the end of their year, they fill out a questionnaire saying what they think the personality profiles are for the monkeys that they know well. We also carry a GPS device in our backpacks as we follow the monkeys so we can get ranging data. And we do some ecological sampling, and occasionally we'll do field experiments, though I'm not going to talk about those today. So one thing we do, which is unusual, I think, is instead of having one person collect data, we have a typist spotter team. So you can see here how that works. I'm the typist on the left, and here's the spotter narrating while I write things down. Over time, we've developed a comprehensive system of codes to identify each monkey, all of their intricate behaviors and vocalizations, and all of the plants and animals they interact with. So when we started the project, we had micro cassette recorders, and we did everything on these tapes. And I had to painfully transcribe them into paper and then enter them into Excel files. Then we switched to these Scions, wonderful, sturdy device. And we still supplemented with digital recorders for the fast action, like the play and the big coalitionary fights. And now we have become even more modern. We don't have the nice feel of a keyboard to guide your hand. But on the other hand, you can store hundreds of monkey photos on here to help recognize monkeys you haven't seen in a while, photos of all the plants, and you can use it to text for help if bad things happen in the forest. So to expand a little more on what we're writing down, when you saw me typing in that phone, it's the stuff that's in this far right column. So this is a very complex sort of monkey shorthand that we all learn as the volunteers join the project. And every time you hit enter, it's time-stamped automatically. And then we also add, at the end of the day, the codes for the typist and the spotter, because we have to think a lot about inter-observer reliability, since it's a long-term project, making sure that everybody's collecting data in exactly the same way. So we have training exams before they start collecting data, and then we do repeat testing every month to make sure that people aren't introducing errors, forgetting what codes mean or something like that. And so we can, and also the vocalization recognition tests, for example, is some people can see really well, but they don't really have good auditory recognition. And so we know what data are trustworthy and which aren't. So in this column, the first letter of the codes indicates what kind of data it is, which tells us what syntax follows. So anything that starts with C is just a comment in Spanish or English, no special syntax. Something that starts with a P would be group scan of CE, that means the monkey named Celeste. And she is foraging and traveling, and she's in proximity, 5 to 10 body lengths of the monkey named Calypso. Go down to this yellow part. This is a focal follow of the monkey named Yasuni. When the watch beeps, you do a scan of what he's doing and who's near him. So he is foraging on fruit BP, that's bromeliad pinguine, within 10 body lengths of the monkey named Bilbo. And then the H lines mean his object handling. So he picks up a fruit, a cluster of 3 bromeliad pinguine fruits. He bites it twice, he ingests 3 times and drops it. Let's go down here to an F line. F lines are a focal doing something to somebody else. So the next code is the behavior and then the recipient. So FAVMR means focal looks at the monkey named Monster, and the next line, he is supplanting Monster to take her sticks away from her, and so on and so forth. So if you wanted to apply to be a research assistant, this link here shows how to do that and explains the application process and has a detailed guide about what it's like. It's not all fun. I have to tell you that, we start each day about 3 a.m. having to ford rivers like that, and you often fall on the river and are very wet from the beginning of the day. You're climbing up and down cliffs all day. Almost everything in this forest has spines on it, and it's full of stinging insects. So it's not all wonderful. You don't get a lot of sleep. So we start the day at 3 a.m., commute to the forest, do the hike in, then follow the monkeys for 13 hours, and then do all of that in reverse. So we think it's worth it. It's a lot of fun, but it is a lot of work. And here are a couple of other videos about the project if you want to find out more about it later. I did want to say a little more about actually, no, Vilma, you gave an introduction to the history of the project, so I think I can skip that part. Just as Jane named,
you can go ahead and yeah, it's okay. Some people might have missed it.
Oh, I was just saying we founded the project in 1990. It was my dissertation project. But since then, we've expanded to have all these groups, and we need a big team to run this because one person can't, well, it's really not safe to have one person do this. You really want to have a team and have 2 people with each social group that we're collecting data on for the day. So just as Jane named all of the chimps, we name all of the capuchins. So like Jane, we refrain from capturing and marking the animals with collars or tattoos. We think their safety and comfort is much more important than our personal convenience. And so even though it makes our work as scientists a lot more difficult to not have the radio transmitters on and to have to search for them painfully for days on end sometimes, we do have this strict non-interference policy. We really want the monkeys to trust us. It takes about 3 months for new volunteers to recognize all of the individuals by their faces, but hopefully in this slide you can see how each face is distinct. For example, Odin here has this freckle here and the really dark temples. Thornhill has this snaggletooth. Putufo has a bulgy forehead and his mouth is always hanging open and he's missing a hand. Arcadio has a terrible skin eczema problem. Mombasa has really dark poofy eyebrows and a dark spot here, and Oprah has this nice, lovely peak down his forehead. Another aspect of our non-interference policy is that we never ever feed the monkeys or even eat items from their diet in front of them. And this is a lesson we learned from Jane. So we're very grateful that she learned that lesson for us. In her work, as you probably know, provisioning the monkeys to bring them closer to camp made them really aggressive, and it altered the nature of their interactions both with humans and with other chimpanzees. And so we've learned from that, and we don't do that. You'll also see that problem in some national parks, like the famous Manuel Antonio Park, where people go to photograph monkeys in Costa Rica. They steal food from people, they climb on them, they're pretty aggressive. And so our goal with our relationship with the monkeys is to be as boring as possible, act like cows or something, so that they aren't at all interested in what we're doing, and we can just watch them doing their normal behavior. And also because we don't want to put them in conflict with humans. So if it dawned on the monkeys that humans were a possible source of food, they would try to take the food from them, and that would put them at risk of disease or capture for the pet trade or injury from people who didn't want to be stolen from. We're also quite strict in insisting that no one try to befriend the animals. And I know it's very flattering and tempting to be touched by a wild animal, but it does put them animals at risk. And so our ideal is to get close and have enough trust that we can get close enough to see what they're doing and write it down, but not to get any closer than that. So now that I've explained some of the preliminaries, let's talk about some individual monkey stories. So I'm going to start by introducing you to a capuchin love triangle, Mescala, Pablo, and Moth. And this is Mescala. She is the alpha female of Rambo's group and probably the most inspiring alpha female that I've known. She was very close friends with her mother, Chupacabra, and also formed extraordinarily close alliances with Pablo and Moth, who were the two alpha males during her adulthood. And she lived to the ripe old age of 34 years. In this photo, you see Mescala napping with her daughter Mooch, her granddaughter Pod, and Pablo. She had very close relationships with her own mother and all of her descendants. And Mescala and Pablo, who sired, who produced, I think, 12 kids together, were very effective allies and co-parents. So once, for example, when Mooch was, I forget, 2 or 3 years old, she stepped on a boa constrictor that was hidden under some leaves and she was caught by it. And she screamed and her parents were over there in just a second or two, both biting on both ends of the snake as it tried to strangle her, and someone else came and pulled her out of the coils while they were attacking the snake from both ends, and they saved her life. And she went on to become alpha female herself, and then Pod became alpha female after that. So it was a great deed that Mescala and Pablo did. And she was similarly brave and helpful with all of her offspring. She was, however, a very stern disciplinarian of some of her sons after they grew up and became bigger and stronger than she was. So I remember one of the first intergroup encounters after a trio of her sons had moved next door to Abby's group. They came in and challenged their former group for access to a favorite sleep site and water hole. And Mescala bit her son and sent him packing. He and his group ran away, ignominiously defeated by Mom. So that was inspiring too. Rambo's group was remarkably stable and prosperous during Mescala and Pablo's reign. And this reign of Pablo's was 18 years. So Mescala and Pablo's many sons helped him maintain that position for long after he was in good fighting condition. And this was good for Mescala too, because in white-faced capuchins, the biggest threat to infants is new alpha males coming in from the outside, because they will kill the infants sired by the previous alpha males so they can start their breeding careers as soon as possible. By keeping Pablo in charge of the group, Mescala was ensuring the survival of her descendants. So this slide shows the remarkable reproductive success of Pablo and Mescala. So Mescala had 8 offspring, 36 grandchildren, so 13 of them via her sons and 23 via her daughters, 32 great-grandchildren, and total descendants then 76. It'll be a little more than that because we're just now next week getting the paternity results for the past decade, which will increase all of these numbers. Pablo had 25 children, 115 grandchildren, so 52 via his sons, and that number will go up a lot when we get the new data in, and 63 via the daughters, 94 great-grandchildren, 9 great-great-grandchildren, so total minimum is 243. It's pretty impressive for a primate. Mescala was the mother of 3 sons, including a male who became alpha in the neighboring group, and 4 daughters. So let me turn now to telling this story more from Pablo's perspective. Pablo is a fairly unusual alpha male in many ways. So a typical capuchin alpha male is really pretty much of a bully. And he's determined not to let any other males get too chummy with one another, probably because he doesn't want them to gang up against him. So a typical scene in most capuchin groups is that when the alpha male sees 2 other males grooming or cuddling or playing, he'll run over and threaten one of them and then ask for the other to help him against his former buddy. Pablo didn't do that so much. He was kind and permissive with his allies, and he even groomed them, which is really very unusual for a capuchin male. The secret to his success, we think, is that he had these very close bonds with his 12 very loyal sons. And so he just had to kind of glare at his enemies, and his sons would charge after them and do his bidding. And he really didn't have to fight much at all in the last decade of his life. And he was very much supported by the females in the group too. This sort of complex diagram shows how successful Pablo was as a breeding male from a different perspective, a little more nuanced. So let me explain this diagram. Along the top here, you have different breeding seasons extending from the first year he was alpha up till his death. Just slightly off the slide over here. And along here, these rows are the names of the different adult males in the group. So the top half is immigrant males, and the bottom are males born into this group who matured in this group. So wherever you see shading, either in gray or blue, that means that one of these males was an adult and in residence in this group during that breeding season. So the blue shows the alpha male. So you can see here that Pablo was alpha male up until the very end there, when Moth took over. And these in the gray just means resident subordinate. So these little dots represent infants born. So the black dots are infants born to a female who was not related to Pablo. And then the red triangles are infants born to daughters of Pablo. And the circles, the red circles, are infants born to granddaughters of Pablo. So you can see a very striking pattern here that Pablo is not breeding with any of his female descendants. Somehow they all know who dad is, who grandfather is. He is, however, monopolizing the reproduction with the other females with 3 exceptions. This one here, and then these 2 sired by Porthos. So let's take a closer look at this pattern. Who is breeding with Pablo's daughters and granddaughters? These 2 immigrants, Porthos and Aramis, did a lot of the breeding up to the point when the group fissioned again. And then these 2 males eloped, if you will, with the females they'd been breeding with during that time period. And these down here, with the exception of Moth, are all paternal half-siblings of the females that they bred with. So it seems like the mechanism for recognizing paternal half-siblings is not so well developed in capuchins. So why was Moth so successful? Moth is this baby here. So he has an interesting circumstance of birth, which is not at all typical, in that his father was not the alpha male. And furthermore, his mother and all of his closest female kin left the group at this point in time, just as Moth reached sexual maturity. So although he was a natal male, he was not very closely related either via the paternal line or the maternal line to the breeding females in the group. And that's probably why he was so successful in breeding with Pablo's descendants here. Let me tell you a little more about his life. His full life story is available on this website where I wrote it up for Leakey Foundation if you want more details, but I'll give you a quick version here. Now, Moth has always been a chunky monkey. He's muscular and also fat, very good at rough and tumble play, and exceptionally interested in food. So when he was around 10 years old, he started visiting other groups with his 2 best friends, Newman and Tranquilo. And Tranquilo helped him invade Abby's group when he was 11 years old, and he became the alpha male there. However, he became really greedy, and he kicked his ally Tranquilo out of the group as soon as he gained power, which left him with no political allies in the group. It was a really stupid thing to do. And then he started killing babies, which, as I said, is a common tactic for new alphas, so that they can bring the mothers into estrus and start breeding themselves. However, this backfired because the females were all furious with him, and the former alpha male came back to help the females, and they evicted him again. And so he went back to Rambo's group, where he stayed for the rest of his life. And then things got really interesting. So he and Pablo became kind of co-leaders. So as I've said, Pablo was getting kind of old, but he was really smart and had just excellent at managing his social relationships. Moth, however, was a big burly guy and a really good fighter, but didn't really have a lot of social sense. So between the 2 of them, they had everything it took to make a good leader. Meanwhile, Mescala was, I think, seeing that this is an important monkey to be close to, and she was developing that relationship too. And they'd have all these long cuddling sessions. You can see that Moth's sucking on Mescala's tail, and she's kneading his ear, and they're being all lovey-dovey. And so that worked really well for a while, but eventually Moth got greedy again, and he beat up Pablo and kicked him out of the group so that he could breed with everybody. So during that co-leadership phase, Moth was just breeding with Pablo's descendants, and Pablo was still breeding with the females he could breed with without committing an act of inbreeding. but no more. And then after Pablo's wounds healed, he sneaked back, and Moth let him stay as long as he didn't start acting like an alpha. And so Pablo was permitted to take care of his grandkids and sort of be in retirement for the last year or so of his life. And Pablo's life, or Moth's life, was still pretty interesting after Pablo's death. Like I said, he's not that great at politics. And we were sort of surprised every time we had 3 incidents of pairs of brothers coming into the group, and we think, oh, this is going to be it. He's going to lose the alpha position. But he never seemed concerned about it. He was very chill about the whole thing. And the only point where we really thought he was going to lose his alpha position was when he got a leg injury. I don't know how he did it, but he seemed to have sprained his knee or something. And he was kind of on the ground for a couple of weeks while he was waiting for that to heal. But you can see that he managed that pretty well. That's Moth in the middle, pirouetting around and forming coalitions and playing. So everyone just came down to the ground and played and groomed with Moth and accommodated his disability until he was well. And then he went back to the trees and acted like his normal self again. So far I've told you about some really extroverted capuchins who had a lot of power and did very well reproductively. But now I'm going to shift gears and tell you about some quite different sorts of personalities who have made really interesting contributions in other ways. So I'll talk about Napoleon and Rumour, who were both really clever and creative, but never attained high rank and didn't do so well reproductively. Rumour was a bit of a loner, and she would spend most of each day looking for insects and sticks on the edge of the group. And it seemed like she didn't have any particularly close genetic relatives in the group. It was evident from her flat nipples that she had never had an infant of her own, and so we presumed that she was sterile. However, she adored babies, and she was willing to groom or carry any infants who came near her. She would also go into the center of the group for an hour or two each day to do some intensive socializing. And she developed some pretty special ways of interacting with her friends. Here you see her with Fons, the alpha male of that group, and both of them are sticking their fingers up one another's noses. Whenever Rumour was in estrus, Fons would sneak off with her, and they would do this for hours on end. But my favorite of her rituals that she invented was eyeball poking. And she would do variants of this with some of her female friends. So this is Rumour on the left, and she's got her friend Sidonia's hand, and she's sticking Sidonia's finger deep into her eye socket, up to the first knuckle in there. And so sometimes this would be done mutually, but some of her friends really didn't want fingers in their eyes, or they would put their own finger in their eye and their fingers in her eye or something like that, or there'd be various variations on a theme. So you can see some of the variations here that they would come up with. So each pair seemed to have a slightly different way of going about these rituals. So there would be common elements running through social networks, but each pair does something a little bit different. And as we watched these different pairs of monkeys adopt some of Rumour's favorite quirky behaviors into their own behavioral repertoires, I began to think a lot more about where these interesting behaviors come from and why on earth monkeys want to do this. It seems like a really bad idea to stick somebody's dirty fingernails in your eye. So Rumour and Napoleon made me think harder about 2 research questions that were rarely studied at the time I began these types of inquiries. One was the way in which primates communicate about the quality of their social relationships, and the other was the ways in which new behaviors are invented and spread through the population. So for example, this was one of my first studies on this topic, and I did it in collaboration with researchers from Santa Rosa, Lomas, and Palo Verde, and Curu. These are all sites in Costa Rica that are pretty close to one another and ecologically similar. And so we looked at these 6 kinds of behaviors, which were patterns that were seen at least one site, to see whether they were seen at all sites. So the question basically are these species stereotypic behaviors that are just rarely performed? Or are there really some places where they aren't performed at all and others where they're invented and then spread socially? And so the C's here mean that this was common at least for some portion of that study. be invented at one point, be all the rage and go out of style, but at least for some portion of the period when that group was studied. The R's mean that it has been seen, but it never caught on. And then the dashes just mean that although we've spent a lot of time watching these animals, we've never seen it. So you can see that some of these behaviors, well, none of these behaviors are seen in all groups, but some of them are independently invented in multiple groups, which is interesting. So certain innovations that may seem really wacky to us may seem like more of an obvious thing to do if you're a capuchin monkey. And I'm going to show you just a few more of these from this film we're making right now, just so you can get a sense for some of the fun variations. So we think that these rituals provide information that goes above and beyond the more species typical signals like grooming and play that are normally used to negotiate relationships for a few reasons. One is that these special rituals that are unique to each pair need to be developed and negotiated within each pair of monkeys. They're not automatically understood. If you just go up to somebody you've never met before, stick your finger in their eye, they're not going to get what's going on. So they need to work out the rules about who does what to whom, and this takes time. So just the fact that they need to spend so much time working out what to do together demonstrates commitment to that particular relationship, which takes time away from other relationships. Also, they tend to use behaviors that are a bit risky or uncomfortable, like sticking the finger in the eye or biting hair out of somebody's head or sticking your fingers in between somebody's jaws. The Israeli biologist Amat Zahavi has speculated that such behaviors are useful in eliciting an honest response about how a partner feels about the relationship. The same behaviors may be either really aversive or really pleasant, depending entirely on the quality of the relationship itself. So imagine, for example, a dog licking your face. You may respond really positively or negatively, depending on how you feel about that particular dog. We think the same logic applies to the sorts of rituals the capuchins make up. Another individual monkey who gave us a lot of insight into the innovation and spread of bond testing rituals and the ways in which young monkeys learn about technology is Napoleon. We first met him when he immigrated into Flake's group as a young adult in 2004. Napoleon is a terrible name for him because he's really, really shy. He's always lurking on the edge of the group. He's clever, but he seems completely lacking in political ambition. And whenever there's a fight going on, he runs the other way. He'll just bounce across the pasture as fast as possible to get out of the action. Like Rumor, he's really unsuccessful reproductively. So he didn't have any babies until the very last year of his life when he produced little Crowley here. And Crowley's mother was the full sibling of that current alpha male. So like Rumor, Napoleon mainly forages far from other monkeys, but he does seem to enjoy quick bouts of intense social interaction, mainly with immature monkeys and with a couple of low-ranking females that he really is fond of. So this clip shows a fun game that Napoleon invented and spread to other monkeys. So the goal is to bite a big tuft of hair out of the head or the shoulder of the partner. And then the other monkey is supposed to try to get their hair back by prying that mouth open and pulling the hair out. And there are variants of this game too that he's invented, like that use toys instead of hair or fingers or something like that. And so soon you're going to see in this clip that Jade gets the hair out and thinks he's done and there's no more left, and Napoleon has to re-engage him. I should say also that when they run out of hair, then they may switch. So Jade may bite Napoleon's hair out the next time. There's a lot of reciprocity here. There, Jade's giving up and Napoleon is like, wait, look, got some more still, see? So we recently published a paper in a special issue about the evolution of ritual, in which we analyzed data from Napoleon's group to test whether these types of interactions that monkeys like Napoleon and Rumor invent are likely to be bond testing rituals or ways of solidifying bonds or rituals designed to establish and maintain group cohesion. So this social network diagram is based on the time spent in proximity to other monkeys. So the thicker the lines, the more time these monkeys spend together. And you can see that Napoleon is way out here. He doesn't have any lines at all. So he is the social outcast of the group, at least in terms of proximity. However, if you create a social network based not on proximity, which is the previous graph up in the upper right-hand corner, but instead on frequency with which he performs rituals, then it's a completely different situation. He's a key player in the invention and spread of these weird behaviors. So this is showing all of the rituals, and I'll define ritual for you in a minute. And this is just the games that involve back and forth, like the 3 games I just described to you. So what I mean by ritual, okay, we were asked to contribute to this special issue of a journal in Philtrans about the evolution of ritual behavior. And the aim was for us to look at primate species and see if the rudiments of human ritual were present in these other species, and what are the characteristics of species that do have rituals. So we interpreted the word ritual in this paper in the way that most ethologists and psychologists and anthropologists have used the term. So a ritual has to have the following characteristics. It has to be learned rather than innate. It involves repurposed behavioral elements from other parts of the behavioral repertoire. So for example, trying to apply foraging behaviors to the face of your social partner. It has to be a lack of immediate utilitarian purpose, a frequent use of sacred objects, so things like a tuft of hair or a special stick or fruit or something. Elements are often repeated. There is a high degree of attentional focus on the partner and or the object handled by the partner. And the interaction seems to be pleasurable, rewarding, and performed spontaneously in the absence of stress. So we tested 3 hypotheses about the function of rituals using data on the rates at which these behaviors were performed by pairs of monkeys that had particular characteristics. So if you want in the Q&A, I can show you the data, but right now I'll just tell you the results. So the first hypothesis in the literature that we were testing was that rituals serve to establish and maintain social bonds. So if that's true, then you'd expect that there would be more ritual performance in dyads that spend the most time together. That was not what we found. It was the opposite. You'd also expect more frequent ritual performance in dyads that had high relationship quality. And that was sort of true, but it was not a linear relationship. And you'd expect most frequent cooperation in coalitionary aggression among the same dyads that do the most rituals. And that was true. It was a modest correlation, but that was true. Second hypothesis is that rituals are tests of social bonds. So they're a way of gathering information about the quality of the relationship, but they don't in and of themselves change the relationship necessarily. So first prediction is that rituals should involve some risk and or discomfort according to Ahmad Zahavi's ideas about bond testing. And that's true. Almost all of these rituals involve doing something a little bit dangerous or uncomfortable. Rituals should be most frequent when the state of the relationship is unclear. So not in the dyads that spend the most time together, but in dyads that haven't seen one another for a while and need to get some update on how the status of the relationship is. And third, we would expect the most frequent performance in dyads that have pretty comfortable relationships, enough that it wouldn't be terrifying to stick your finger between someone's jaws, for example, but not completely stable relationships. So there's enough uncertainty about whether something nice or nasty is going to happen that you want to have a little test to see how that partner feels about you. And that is exactly what we found. So we had a relationship quality index from 0 to 1. 0 means that when you get together, bad things happen. A 1 means that it's all smooth, you never do anything mean to one another. And 0.5 is sort of 50-50. So the peak ritual performance is above half, above 0.5. And the top third of all dyads, the most comfortable third, didn't have very high rates of ritual performance. The third hypothesis is that participation in rituals promotes group-wide solidarity. And we didn't see any evidence in support of that. So if that were true, you'd expect simultaneous performance by many different monkeys using a consistent form. And that isn't what we saw. We see each dyad doing their thing asynchronously and a little bit differently. It turns out that Napoleon's intellect extends beyond the invention of creative games to play with other capuchins to also include food processing skills. So monkeys love Panama fruits, these funny looking fruits down here. But the problem is they're very heavily defended. So they have this thick husk, which I can't open without the aid of a machete. And then the seeds are covered with these nasty, painful hairs that need to be rubbed off even once they've got these out of the shell. The processing of a Panama fruit takes some monkeys more than an hour per fruit. In fact, some of them just can't do it at all. My former graduate student, Brendan Barrett, and I did a field experiment in which we controlled access to these fruits. So these are a part of the natural diet in this population. However, Napoleon's group didn't have any Panama trees in its home range. So Brendan would bring some fruits in and he'd control the access to it, make sure that he'd run ahead of the group, place the fruits, and then we'd wait and see who found them. So we could document all of their learning process about these fruits. And Napoleon rapidly discovered the most efficient solution for opening these fruits, which involved sliding a canine tooth, that fang, along the seam of the pod. Despite his peripheral social status, Napoleon soon became the target of observation for the rest of the group, and other monkeys discarded their less efficient solutions in favor of Napoleon's better solution. Our statistical modeling approach enabled us to compare the fit of several different learning models to the data. And so we found that younger animals were more prone to incorporate social information and also incorporate their recent individual experience relative to older individuals who kind of fall into a rut and just do things the way they're used to doing them. Monkeys were prone to copying the most efficient techniques and the techniques used by older individuals. There was no conformity bias. In fact, they were more interested in looking at the rarer techniques, nor was there a strong tendency to copy close maternal kin or high-ranking individuals. Okay, I'm going to tell you about some cute babies now. So Nobu is our first infant I want to talk about. He was born in August 2001. And when he was 8 months old, his mother, Nanny, was killed by a poacher. It was a man who'd been hired to do some work by a local farmer, and he was throwing rocks at monkeys and trying to kill them just for fun. And Nobu was initially extremely depressed, and he just didn't want to leave his mother's dead body. He was cooing and doing lost calls and just completely beside himself. But fortunately, he got a lot of help from his family. So his brothers and male cousins would carry him everywhere, and he got milk handouts from all of the females in the group. Now, he didn't get as much milk as he would have if he'd still had mom, so he did end up being much smaller than the other members of his cohort as they all matured, and he would get rides for a lot longer because he still looked like a cute baby when the others were more grown up. But despite his cute, tiny appearance, he was really much more efficient at foraging. He was very brave and became very competent quite quickly. He had a lot of scary things happen to him in his short life. For example, twice he got captured by enemy groups. And normally what happens when they run into another group is that everyone grabs the babies and runs. So the males run towards one another and fight, and then the females and the other alloparents grab babies and they run far away with them so that they don't end up at risk, because infants can be killed in intergroup encounters by the enemy group. So Nobu was captured but escaped twice in those situations. And then he also, at some point, and we don't know how this happened, but he lost half of his tail. It may have been a similar incident like that, but he healed that well. And they're remarkably good at recovering from wounds, and they take care of one another's wounds. His chief attachment figure after his mother died was Abby, his grandmother. And she was very old and arthritic then, and she would spend a lot of time foraging on the ground because she didn't like to climb trees anymore. And so he would go way out in the cattle pastures with her, and they'd eat acorns together. Unfortunately, Nobu's life had a tragic ending. There was a little tour group. It included some children, and a boy with a slingshot killed Nobu. And this was awful. And so we tell the story of Nobu often when we go to school visits, and try to explain to people that there's really nothing to be gained from recreational hunting. I mean, you can practice target practice with a beer can on a post or something. You don't need to do it on a living organism. And also explain that each individual is special, that they're not just interchangeable parts, that whenever you kill one individual, it leaves a sad mother or a sad offspring, or friends that will really miss that individual. And if you kill an alpha male, for example, it may mean that there's a big domino effect of infanticide. So killing one monkey has a huge impact on the group dynamics in general. And usually once people start thinking about it in that way, they are willing to change their behavior, even adults, and especially children. Okay, here's another of our orphan stories. This is Winslow Homer. He was the little Prince Charming of Abby's group. So here he is with his alpha female mother, Dolly, nursing. He was so cute and so popular with everyone in the group that alloparents were stealing him from mom and carrying him all over the place. And so she often couldn't find her baby when she wanted to nurse. And so she'd just go find some other baby to give milk to because he was unavailable. And he was just so self-confident and full of himself because he got all this attention and everybody was so nice to him. And when he was 14 months old, so around the time when weaning is just beginning, there was an intergroup encounter with Rambo's group, and he got trapped on the enemy team. But in total contrast to every other baby we've seen in an intergroup encounter, his attitude was, oh, new friends. He didn't call for his mom. He didn't lost call. He didn't make any attempt to get back home. He just dived into playing with new babies. He climbed all over big, scary Moth, which is a terrifying thing to do. And he marched confidently up to Mombasa here and asked for some milk and grooming, and she gave it to him. And soon she was his adopted mother. And it was just a remarkable thing. We were so scared for him. And I think the fact that he didn't act scared meant that no one thought to bully him. They were just like, oh, he's pretty cute after all, which is the attitude that the human observers always had about him. So that was a very bizarre and perplexing thing. And consequently, he became the youngest migrant ever at 14 months. Normally they disperse around 4 to 10 years of age, median 7. So here you can see him just jumping into the playbouts, week 1 of his new group. He's the one on the left here. It was remarkable. And the researchers loved him so much that one researcher made a website just about a day in Winslow Homer's life, which we use as an environmental education tool. So if you're a teacher or if you just like primates, just check this out. Basically, it takes the GPS track for an all-day follow of Winslow Homer, and you can follow him, see the habitat on Google Earth, where he goes, and each icon here you can click on and see it's a social interaction between Winslow and somebody. You can see what he's doing all day, every single thing Winslow does all day. And then there are a couple of other educational resources for teachers that I put links to here. This is a children's story that my daughter wrote about baby monkeys learning how to cross the road, across the busy street. And this blog has a lot of material that might be useful for people doing primate education work. Stories about the monkeys, but also details about how scientists operate when they're doing primatology. So throughout my 3 decades at Lomas Barbadal, I and several of my research assistants and students have been active in providing environmental education to 11 K-12 schools near the reserve. Many Costa Ricans who had early exposure to our environmental education efforts, and in particular those who heard a lot of life stories of individual monkeys, are now staunch supporters of conservation efforts. Our efforts take many forms, so routine classroom visits, assistance with nature clubs and science fairs, and for a while we had a fun monkey ambassadors program in which students were encouraged to take whatever we teach them along with printed materials home to their parents in the hopes that their parents would listen to their kids more than they listen to us, to stop things like poaching of recreational poaching of monkeys. I also do a lot of outreach with community adults, so I'm on call to give talks when the Park Service needs a speaker for an event. And I visit libraries and local municipality staff and local ranches. And I also give talks to and guided nature tours to groups of international students when I can. As Jane knows, and as you know, education at the elementary and secondary school levels is absolutely critical to shaping children's love of nature. And ultimately, the fate of Lomas Barbadal and its inhabitants will lie with these children who are the voters and policymakers of the future. Almost all of our staunchest conservation allies are former participants of our early environmental education efforts, such as Stephanie here, who was in a nature club when she was in high school. And then when she was in college, she went to Lomas and did a small study of capuchins. And she loves these animals. She's always asking for photos of the monkeys and making t-shirts of them to wear around town. Also, a master's project by one of my former research assistants studied the human population to find out whether the early environmental education had a significant impact on current conservation attitudes and willingness to help with conservation endeavors, and it really did. The longer a field site runs, the deeper its connections with local communities and the better equipped it is to serve the habitat country with regard to conservation-related assistance and environmental ed. So we've recently joined forces with many community members to establish Amigos del Ambiente, which is a group that engages in environmental outreach and citizen science projects. For example, right before COVID struck, we were really getting on the roll, and we built this nature trail along the river that runs through town with the idea of training community people to collect phenology data and do biodiversity monitoring so that we could track global climate change and how it's impacting this habitat. And we had just done the initial training sessions when COVID caused all these lockdowns. So it's not running quite as smoothly as we'd hoped, but we're picking up again now. So the idea was we would team up with the International High School on science projects so that they could use some of our data to learn basic data analysis skills. We also contribute to conservation efforts in Costa Rica in a variety of ways. For example, we help with management plans, and we help with reforestation projects in collaboration with ranches and with the Park Service and the EDA, the Development Agency. And we also provide vigilance for the Park Service. We've demonstrated that the presence of researchers with a monkey group greatly decreases capuchin mortality. So monkeys are 2.8 times more likely to disappear and presumably die on days when researchers are not present. Long-term field sites also provide excellent opportunities for young scientists to be trained in field methods and to have data collection opportunities. So one of the Lomas Barbadal Monkey Project's educational contributions that makes me most proud is the training of so many early career field primatologists. 183 people from 20 countries have benefited from some fieldwork opportunities at Lomas. Of the 98 interns who stayed for a year or more, 66 applied to graduate school, and all but one of those have been admitted to high quality programs. Data from Lomas contributed to 4 master's theses and 8 completed PhD theses. It's hard to keep track of the subsequent careers of all of these people, so the numbers I'm about to give you are certainly underestimates, but 18 Lomas alumni are now college professors. At least 11 obtained postdoctoral fellowships, 21 work in environmental education, 19 are in conservation-related jobs, 6 work in the ecotourism industry, and 6 work in animal welfare jobs. So if you want more information about the Lomas project, these are some of the useful links. I think I've presented some of these earlier in the talk. How to apply to be a research assistant, videos that are presenting this material probably in a more fun way than I just did. Videos showing the behaviors in the ethogram for these monkeys, our blog, and our Facebook page where we post monkey gossip and news about recent publications, upcoming talks, and things like that. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for inviting me here, to the Costa Rican Park Service and Palón de la Bajura for giving us logistical support and giving us permission to work, to over 180 field assistants, and to long-term managers who made my life so much easier, and especially to my graduate students who helped with some of the most exciting results, including the genetic analyses. And of course to the funding agencies, because it requires a lot of funding to run a project for 31 years. And I want to give a particular acknowledgement to the Wild Capuchin Foundation. If you're really interested in what we're doing and want to support it, you can make a small donation to that organization as well. And so we do, like your organization, we are supporting research, but also environmental education and conservation. So I'll close now and take questions. Should I stop sharing my screen now?
Yes, please, Susan. Okay.
Okay.
Actually, Susan, that is super interesting. I am convinced the telenovela plot lines are based on capuchin monkeys.
Oh, there's no end of drama ever.
Yeah. Anyway, so normally we go into Q&A right now, but I think can we actually do the Wi-Fi first so that we can capture as many faces as possible. So everyone, if you want to be part of this Wi-Fi, can we ask you to turn on your camera, and then Andy is going to help us take the screenshot. So Andy, are you seeing everybody's faces?
Soon, coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're ready, you can turn on your video, and then I'll just take some photos. Okay.
Okay.
Let me smile.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. And I think there's another page. All right, so 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay,
Okay.
go to our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And then we will get into Q&A. There are quite a few questions, and actually a lot of them, a lot of our audience is very interested in the rituals and games. So Vilma, shall I start with the first one?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I guess, the rituals, there's a question about how long on average is the period of study for other monkeys to learn the ritual. And then regarding the games, how long do they last each game session?
Mm-hmm. So the learning process can be months, really. All right, so, sorry, I'm getting hoarse already. So it depends how elaborate it is. Like eyeball poking takes a really long time to get the nerve to do that. Hand sniffing, not quite so long. But I find that as I'm tracking the development of each dyadic ritual, it can take several months really before it sort of stabilizes. And when they're doing it for a single session, it may be like 10 minutes to 30 minutes. Sometimes it lasts an hour if it's a really tight pair. And then in terms of the longevity in a behavioral repertoire, it's usually about 10 years. And then they'll either stop doing it or they'll change to some new kind of ritual, something like that. So it does seem like the transient nature of it is kind of important, actually. Whereas in some kinds of traditions, like a technology tradition, you want to just find the perfect thing that works best and then stick with it. The change seems to be actually a feature of these, maybe an adaptive component of it.
Okay, and it's got it. Vilma, next question.
Yes, still on the topic of rituals. One of our audience members, I think, is asking about rituals. You mentioned rituals, but this individual did not have close proximity. What does that mean? Because, how can you have rituals without close proximity?
Oh, okay. So
what does that whole thing mean?
Yeah. So that's close proximity averaged over, the year or something. So, of course, when they're doing the ritual, they have to be in contact. But what it means is that Napoleon, let's say he's doing his ritual with Balu, and they don't see each other for hours. They don't come within contact for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then they come and they spend a really intensive hour together, and then they separate for many, many more hours. So that's what I mean. So so those proximity measures that are used in the social networks are basically counting up all of the group scans and saying, are they within 10 body lengths of each other during this one and this one, this one. So what proportion of all of the group scans where they could have been in proximity, were they in proximity? And so when he didn't have any lines, it's not like he had absolute zero with everybody, but he had such teensy tiny percentages that he didn't meet the threshold to have a line. I forget what our cutoff was, but
that's clear.
Yeah.
Thank you. A comment?
Yeah, actually, I have a question myself. So what is the conservation status of the capuchin monkeys in I guess, in your study area and then in Costa Rica? And what are the main threats? It sounds like it's just like opportunistic hunting, poaching, but are they affected by the illegal wildlife trade or the illegal pet trade at all?
Yeah, so they're not yet officially, they're not. I think they're threatened, but they're not endangered. So they're not in nearly as much trouble as any of the great apes, for example. But they, of course, any particular population can be, even if the species is not. And capuchins tend to avoid urban areas. They're a lot more shy than macaques are, for example, but they do like to steal fruit from farms and eggs. So they raid chicken coops and they get in big trouble for that. And so their main threats, well, the main threat actually is other capuchin monkeys. But after that, the next biggest threat is humans doing recreational hunting. And I'm talking about Costa Rica now. So if you look in South America and the South American species, human hunter-gatherers do a lot of consumption of capuchins. For example, the ache, that's a very important part of their diet is capuchin monkeys. So in South America, where they're co-residing with indigenous populations, they are eaten. They are not frequently eaten in Costa Rica. Occasionally, capuchin will show up as a boca, like in a disreputable bar. Or a howler monkey may be turned into soup for bronchitis cure. But that's pretty rare, actually, in Costa Rica. It's more recreational hunting, just completely pointless target practice. And then pets are a problem. So I often get emails from people who adopted a cute baby monkey and then it turned into a monstrous adult and was chewing everything up. So capuchins are destructive foragers and they just wreck things. They destroy everything in sight. And so the last thing you want is to have them in a home with you. And so there's a lot of rescue centers in Costa Rica to take those pets that were captured illegally. Fire is another danger. So I mean, and deforestation, of course. So there's a lot of fire in Costa Rica, and tropical dry forest has not evolved in the context of anthropogenic fire. So there is a lot of habitat destruction there. I think it doesn't affect capuchins quite as much as it affects some other species, but it does have a long-term delayed impact. So they actually like secondary growth. They can get a lot of insects out of rotting wood, which is a common feature of recently burned forests. But still in the long run, you don't want to have those big canopy trees come down. And that's what does happen with repeat fires.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, the very similar threats to many other monkey species around the world. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Vilma, next question.
Yeah, we have a question about expansion or expanding the work that you do to other areas. Would it be in other areas in Costa Rica, or would it be possible in countries near Costa Rica, assuming that capuchins live there as well?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of other capuchin sites around the world. And there are many other places where people could have new sites too. I feel like I really have my hands full at Lomas. It kind of takes more time than I have to just run this very complicated project with many groups. But certainly both Nicaragua and Panama have lots of forest that's inhabited by capuchins. And there is some work being done in those countries. Mainly, there's a field school in Nicaragua, Isla de Ometepe, where they do a little bit of work, not really intensive the way I do, but some. And in Panama, Barrio Colorado Island, there's a nice study of capuchins by Meg Crowfoot that's been going on for quite some time. And actually, the very first primatologist, Sierra Carpenter, did some work on howlers, and then Oppenheimer in Barrio Colorado Island. So yeah, capuchins in Panama were studied before the capuchins in Costa Rica, actually. But the two long-term studies are both Costa Rica. My study and the Santa Rosa project are the longest running capuchin studies.
Thank you. Carmen?
Yeah, okay. So there's a question that came in, and let's see. Do any females ever join or with the break-off group of men? If not, then the males will always need to steal or tempt a female from another existing group.
Oh, I didn't quite understand that, but I think I can answer. It's just about the dispersal patterns, right? So the females stay with mom, and it's very, very rare to see anything besides that happening. And then, so the males, if they want to avoid inbreeding, unless they're like Moth, where they have this very peculiar birth circumstance, they have to leave. And so the males will leave together. And but the males are really loyal to their dad. So they're reluctant to leave without their dad too. So sometimes when dad gets overthrown, dad and his sons will co-migrate to a new place. What was there another component to that question?
Let me take a look. I guess the question is really like, no, I guess the question was, do the females ever like leave and join the break off? I guess, for example, the son and the father that left. Yeah.
I see. So when the males are dispersing, do the females ever tag along?
Yeah.
We just had that one case. And that was when this female had such a tragic life. I mean, it was just horrible. So she actually, she was born into Rambo's group, but her mom left with her to join that breakoff group. The whole family, the whole matriline left with Porthos and Aramis. And then that group kept having alpha male replacements and more infanticide. And so she only had one sister and then her mom, and she had such a tragic life. Every time she'd get close to someone, they'd die. Mom died, her sister got run over by a car. Her sons finally left, and then there was just her and her mate and one younger sister and her infant, and that was all that was left of that group. And so they followed the her older son and her nephew to their new group and joined that group. And then she was treated very badly. I mean, females didn't know what to do with a female who wasn't their relative. So it was not very nice for her. And she'd occasionally go off by herself looking for a better life, and there was nothing better. And then she'd come back, and she lost so many babies due to infanticide. It was just a horrible existence. So yeah, she's our only example of a female leaving her group to strike off with the males. And it was not because she wanted to, really, it was just a lack of better options.
Wow. I guess, then I guess the bad outcome maybe perhaps that's why it doesn't happen as often, right? Because
yeah,
it's not successful. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Vilma, next question.
Yes. A question on how can an average person like me contribute to the conservation of these capuchin monkeys?
Well, I think the kind of things you're doing for the macaques, if you did them for the capuchins, are really nice. I mean, I know not everybody has the money and time to go spend a year in Costa Rica, but anytime we're doing environmental education with children, it's going to have trickle-down effects later in life. It may not seem like you're doing really something super important in the moment, but it really does pay off in the long run. I mean, you look around us, or I look at college students these days, and they're just, they're just, this is the way they filter the world is through this, instead of going out into nature. And it's just so important to get people out into the forest or any aspect of nature, really. And you've got macaques in your city. That's just so marvelous. So if you can take people out to appreciate the primates and the forest when they're young, and just really nurture that passion for nature, they may grow up to be famous conservationists. I mean, it's very worthwhile to spend time with children, especially kindling that love of nature. And then, there's little things you can do too, just making small donations to primate projects. That's helpful. And a lot of these projects are just hanging on by a thread, and even a little bit of money can make a difference between closing down a project and surviving to the next grant. So yeah, there's a lot. And then paying attention to your consumer products, so you're not buying hardwood from a forest that's being deforested, things like that as well.
Thank you. Carmen?
Yes, let's see. This is an interesting one. You mentioned there was no conformity bias in food acquisition, but are capuchins mean to those who act differently than others in general?
I don't think they're as bad about that as humans are. And I think, for some kinds of things, there are conformity bias. So I think one of the most interesting things I learned in the process of studying learning strategies in capuchins is that they may use one social learning strategy in one context and another in a different one. So for the Panama fruits, we found that they didn't have a conformity bias. They had this bias towards the payoff, doing the most efficient thing. And that's because these Panama fruits are so hard to deal with that if they didn't do that, they'd never learn how to forage on them. But on the other hand, they have this other very popular food, luhea, which isn't as exciting as Panama, but it's more of a fallback food, and they eat it for 6 months out of the year. And it's really easy. I mean, even a 2-year-old knows how to forage luhea. And there are different ways of doing it, but honestly, it doesn't matter if you pound it or you scrub it. And there they have conformity bias. So they will conform to what their mom does, especially the females. So just as in chimps, females want to do what mom does, and then the boys may start out doing what mom does and then go off and do what their other friends are doing. So conformity is important in that context because there's no efficiency question. So you choose your role models differently depending on the nature of the task at hand. And I'm sure humans do that as well.
But they don't necessarily go out of their way to pick on somebody who doesn't conform.
No, I haven't noticed that. I mean, they pick on each other a lot, but I haven't noticed them doing that for that reason.
Okay, okay. Vilma, next question.
Yeah, what happens to the old or dying monkeys in the group? How are they treated by the rest of the group?
There isn't a huge amount of respect for the elders. I mean, they're not really rude to them either. I think macaques are a lot more rude to the elderly than capuchins are. But there isn't a huge amount of accommodating them either. So for example, a daughter may push her mom aside and become alpha female rather than respecting her to her last days. Actually, sons are more respectful of their fathers than daughters are of their mothers in capuchins, I'd say. However, with infants, if infants die, they'll carry that dead infant for days. Even when all the carnivorous wasps are coming in and trying to eat the baby and stinging the mother, she just won't let go. They're very fiercely defending those dead babies till the bitter end. So they do, they do. It's hard to say what their concept of death is, but they do care very much about their dying infants and try to do the right thing. They don't always understand it. Like one time, Abby's baby had an umbilical hernia and she got confused. She seemed to think it was the umbilical cord and kept eating it. So she was obviously trying to keep the baby alive, but doing totally the wrong thing.
Thank you. Carmen?
Yeah, I'm mindful of the time. So I think maybe we take two more questions or ask two more questions. So I'm going to ask the next one. It's actually a combination of two questions that came in. So you mentioned, that how can people help and, and not everybody can spend a year to volunteer in a sanctuary or in a research project. So one of the questions that came in during registration was, where can a traveler get to photograph capuchins in Costa Rica, and is there a lot of ecotourism going on? And then it's sort of along the similar line, somebody actually asked where in Singapore that the capuchin monkeys can be found. So I think I'm going to throw that question to Andy, and perhaps in the zoo. So yeah, Susan, maybe you start with the first one.
Yeah, I mean, capuchins are very common in Costa Rica. The most famous place for viewing capuchins is Manuel Antonio Park. The monkeys are very bad there. They've been fed by people and they'll steal your lunch, and it's kind of a nightmare. But they're very easy to see, especially if you have a lunch. And so that is the place where most tourists go to see capuchins. And it's a very touristy beach place. For my daughter's graduation, I took her to Osa Peninsula, Corcovado National Park, and that's much harder to get to. And the monkeys are much higher in the canopy, but oh my gosh, that was a wonderful primatology experience. They have all 4 species of primates: the squirrel monkeys, the spiders, the capuchins, and the howlers. So if you are fairly wealthy, then I would recommend going there. But otherwise, if you're more of an economy tourist, yeah, probably Manuel Antonio is the quickest, most sure way to find capuchins. But there are a lot of places. I mean, you could also just go to Lomas Barbadal and just hike the trails and hopefully run into capuchins too. So it's not a reserve for tourists. They don't really cater to tourists. You'd have to kind of do it on your own. But they do have trails anyway that you could go on. And I don't know about Singapore, so Andy will have to answer that one.
Yeah, you can take bus 138 from Ang Mo Kio interchange to Mandai Zoo. There is a group of tough capuchins, so not the white-faced capuchins, but another species at River Safari.
Okay then, thank you both. So it sounds like we start our tour at the Singapore Zoo, and then we go to Costa Rica to visit Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Vilma, I'm going to let you ask the last question of the day.
Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, so Susan, we asked this of all our speakers. This last question is, if you had a wish and your wish was granted tomorrow, what would your wish be for the white-faced capuchins of Lomas Babudal?
Well, I mean, obviously I'd want their foresters stay standing and to have people stop throwing rocks at them. I suppose that would be it. I remember when I was a graduate student, just trying to work out what these monkeys are doing. And this was a wish for me, not for them. So I'd rather preserve the population of capuchins, but I used to wish so badly that I could piggyback on the mind of Curmudgeon, the alpha male, and figure out what he was thinking and what it was really like to be a monkey. So that would be fun, but it would not be as practical or useful as hoping that forest would stop burning and would just stay standing and people would just stop harassing these poor monkeys.
Thank you. We wish your wish comes true.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah, and I think all of us have the same wish, that preserving habitats for all wildlife obviously is very important. So yeah, we hope your wish comes true. And then it's almost noon for us in Singapore and our session has come to a wrap. So I want to thank you again, Susan, for spending time with us and sharing your knowledge and all the really interesting stories about the capuchin monkeys that you study. And of course, I want to thank our audience. You all have been great. And do join us for our upcoming lectures. And we do have something quite exciting coming up in November. So stay tuned to our social media updates and our newsletter, and we'll be announcing some very exciting online activities very soon. So see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Susan.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, Susan.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks so much, Susan. Oh, she's
Bye.
gone.
Bye.
Bye.
Sinway.
Bye, Sinway.
Bye.
Thank you.